are truly honored, and me personally, I am extremely humbled to welcome you at our university, and we look forward to your lecture this evening, Chief Justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mutwa, for your inspirational words and for laying the foundation for our engagement and the lecture that will follow shortly. Our next performance, though, is by the talented voice poet, Leletu Mahambala. We welcome her and request that she join us on the stage to perform her poetry. The stage is yours.
If the day ever arrives where one person remembers that ours is a story of a struggle that once was one in three-part harmony, and artists are then invited to come and commentate on the state of our nation, I pray that the world has ears enough and is ready to hear the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. For I know no sinner's heart that would allow for melodies to be conceived that do not lament the many rivers of blood shed by the man and woman of this land. Innocent souls persecuted. For what? Not for fighting, but for standing for what is right and just. Not for insulting, but for reprimanding evil men who saw fit to entertain themselves by carelessly stripping away the dignity of world-respected men. Not for defending, but for amplifying the voices of those who allowed their fear to bury their talents under the rubble and stench of oppression. I pray for all color to fade, and for the paint to dry on any brush of any painter who dare fails to illustrate in his words the depth of the trauma and sorrow of little ones, who to this day take a moment and stare blankly into empty spaces, failing to fathom that once upon a time they stood in audience to the brutal murder of their mother, and were then labeled as orphans by the rest of the world. This is the sacrifice of other mothers, trying to ensure that us, their other kids, come to a moment where we will live free to be breathing beings. If dancers were to be invited on the stage, I wish for their feet to fail to carry them forward. If their stone king and whittling does not translate to a trance that transports us to a space where we stand face to face with our heroes, if only to thank them for their unique ability to channel and connect with the divine truth and tolerate no man standing as an obstacle. Thank them for their bravery to walk tall, even when darkness opens strange doors that welcomes them to their demise. And all they had was the faith and knowledge that history would always call to mind their work and call us the their neighbor. Active bodies must freeze mid-sin if their enactment does not expose the scars carried by many on a daily. This enactment must not be put on stages if it does not tell us of the many bodies who endured the 48 stabbings, the hammerings on our fathers' heads, the brutal assassination that opened the blood rivers even wider, convincing us that we must get to the Freedom House. Blood, sweat or tears, crying and screaming, crawling and bleeding, screaming and shouting, knowing that by God at the freedom door we shall arrive. Poets must stop writing and reciting their works if all they do is showcase their verbosity and toying around with words. Every single word spoken must seek to serve and resuscitate the spirit of those whose loving arms never had an opportunity to hold their progeny. Every word uttered must carry the spirit of those who laid their bodies down so that we could stand on these stages, hold these microphones, and boldly declare that we too have a voice. When poets recite, no hands must clap, no fingers must click. If that which they speak does not re-invoke the spirit of the loving God in us to remember those who walked a path we were too afraid to step. Every word that is written must sound like a whisper calling on the spirits of our heroes to gather whenever we do. Let's call on their spirit to bless our meetings. Call on the spirit of Mandela, of Sisulu, of Tambo, of Rani, of Bigo, of Sorukwe, of Makeke, of Matikizela, of Mboyi. Yes. Call on the spirit of those two partners who never committed a crime but stood against the greatest crime South Africa had ever seen. Call on the spirit of Victoria Mxenge, the spirit of Mlungisi, Griffith and Victoria. Call on their spirits. Tamakushani, Babizeni, Gamagama, Tetani Nesfelezon Neta, Tetani Nesfelezon Libele, Isfelezon Boyi, Tetani Nesfelezon Changisa, Ozulo, Oskomo, Omstajana, Amangwevu, Tetani, Ufowateke, Amako.
Wow. Thank you, Leletu. You are immensely talented. And I must add that she's a graduate of the Faculty of Law. Which should tell us that lawyers can indeed achieve poetic justice. Having said that, I now call on the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Law, Dr. Lynn Biggs, to say a few words and then to introduce the Chief Justice. Lynn?
Program Director, Professor Jana Botha, Vice Chancellor, Professor Sibongile Mutwa, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, the Mxenge family, the members of the Langa family, judges in attendance, the Deputy Executive Mayor, Councillor Babalwa Labishe, representatives of the different law societies, the bar, the sidebar, and the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, members of the university management, council members, and the DVCs present, staff and students, in particular, staff and students of the Faculty of Law, the executive deans, deputy deans, and senior directors, honoured guests, family and friends, all protocol observed. Thank you to Prof. Mutwa for the welcome this evening. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the Chief Justice of South Africa, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, who will be delivering the Griffith and Victoria Mxenge Memorial Lecture this evening. Chief Justice Zondo commenced his legal career, serving part of his articles of clerkship under Victoria in her law firm in Durban. His training was cut short by her assassination. In a way, you could say that Chief Justice Zondo's association with Victoria came full circle. Now that the student has become the master, it is fitting that he deliver this lecture in memory of his mentor. Chief Justice Zondo was born in KwaZulu-Natal and matriculated from St. Mary's Seminary there. He obtained his B. Juris degree at the University of Zululand and LLB from the then University of Natal. He holds 3 LLM degrees from the University of South Africa in labour law, commercial law, and patent law. He was admitted as an attorney in 1989 and practiced as a partner in Mate and Zondo Incorporated in Durban before his first appointment to the bench as an acting judge of the Labour Court in 1997. After a period as a judge of the then Transvaal Provincial Division of the High Court, he became Judge President of the Labour Court and the Labour Appeal Court in 2000. He returned to the North Gauteng Division at the end of his term of office in the Labour Court in 2010, and the following year was appointed as an acting judge of the Constitutional Court. He became a full judge of the Constitutional Court in 2012 and was appointed Deputy Chief Justice in 2017. 2018 was the year that saw Raymond Zondo become a household name in South Africa, when he was appointed by the President to chair the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption, and fraud in the public sector, including organs of state. Known to us all as the Zondo Commission, this 4-year investigation was a watershed, history-making period for our country, which unfolded on televisions around the world. We watched with conflicting emotions: dismay, horror, despair, sometimes disbelief, and sometimes laughter too, as he presided, earning widespread respect for his calm but firm approach and seasoned leadership. Chief Justice Zondo was appointed by President Ramaphosa on the 10th of March 2022 as the 6th Chief Justice of South Africa since the advent of democracy. Throughout his career, he has contributed to the pursuit of justice and equality in South Africa, serving, for example, in 2 of the committees of the Goldstone Commission, investigating political violence and intimidation in the years running up to the first democratic elections. He served on the ministerial task team that drafted a post-apartheid labour law regime for South Africa that became the Labour Relations Act 66 of 1995, and he was the first chair of the governing body of the CCMA. During his time as Judge President of the Labour and Labour Appeal Courts, he contributed to developing the post-apartheid judicial system in areas including the use of official languages in our courts and how to deal with complaints of racism and sexism in the judiciary. Chief Justice Zondo has received numerous honours and awards for his services to the law and human rights, his leadership and his defence of our constitutional democracy, most recently an honorary doctorate in law from Rhodes University in March this year. As our country's chief jurist, I have no doubt that what he has to say on his topic, the role and significance of a strong judiciary in South Africa's constitutional democracy, will provide us with great insight and a view into the present and future of our justice system. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honoured to have the esteemed presence of Chief Justice Zondo, who will now deliver the Griffith and Victoria Mxenge Memorial Lecture. Chief Justice Zondo, the stage is yours. Well, we look forward to your wisdom this evening.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Program Director, Professor Joanna Botha, Chancellor of the Nelson Mandela University, Dr. Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi, who is joining us virtually, Chair of Council, Ambassador Nozipho January Badil, Vice Chancellor, Professor Sibongile Mutwa, the Langa family, Phumzile Gumbi, Justice Langa's daughter and eldest child, Mr. Sandila Langa, Justice Langa's son, Ms. Pidile Langa, Justice Langa's daughter, Ms. Tava Sheila Ndlovu, Justice Langa's niece, the Mxenge family, Dr. Fumbata Mxenge, whom I'm seeing today after many, many years. I think it's been quite a long time since we last met. Mr. Mbasa Mxenge, Griffiths and Victoria Mxenge's son, Ms. Nonkululeko Mxenge, Griffiths and Victoria Mxenge's daughter, Professor Andrew Kiet, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Dr. Lynn Biggs, Executive Dean, Faculty of Law, Judge Yanni XDM, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by saying it was wonderful that I originally agreed to come and deliver this lecture, thinking that it was simply going to be this lecture in honor of Griffiths and Victoria Mxenge, but was nicely surprised a few days ago or last week when I was told that former Chief Justice Pius Langa would be honored as well, and I would be asked to unveil the plaque of the building. Both the Mxenges and the Langas were people that I have known for a long time. We're always close, and I've known former Chief Justice's children for a long time. I was honored that I was asked to unveil the plaque. I consider it a special honor and privilege that the Nelson Mandela University invited me to deliver a lecture in honor of the late Griffiths Mlungisi Mxenge and Victoria Mandela Mxenge, a most distinguished couple that was brutally assassinated by the apartheid agents for their contributions to the dismantling of apartheid and the attainment of freedom for the majority of people of this country. I have been invited to deliver lectures in honor of this couple on other occasions in the past, but each time I'm invited to do so, I feel a deep sense of honor and privilege to be asked to deliver a lecture in their honor. Maybe it is because I had the opportunity to work under Victoria Mxenge before she was assassinated, and came to understand not just her, but in a way what her husband, Griffith, held dear in his heart. I want to say a few words about my interactions with Mrs. Victoria Mxenge before I proceed, because she is one of those women who had a lasting impact on my own life. I didn't get a chance to meet her husband, Griffith. I knew of her as a well-known lawyer in Durban who represented political activists, but he was assassinated before I could meet him. By the way, one of my names, African names, is Mlungisi. So Griffith was Griffith Mlungisi Mxenge. One of my names is Mlungisi. And more interestingly, Victoria's other name was Nonyamezelo. And one of my names is Mnyamezeli. So my full names are Raymond Mnyamezeli Mlungisi Zondo. That's RMM. And when I started doing articles under Mrs. Victoria Mxenge, she told me that when she gave me a job as an article clerk, she actually didn't have any vacancy. She said she gave me this job because I was harassing her, phoning her. But something else also happened which is quite interesting. When I came to her office, the name that I was using was Mlungisi. That's how I was known, generally. But after a few weeks of me working in her office, she called me one day and said, "From now on, you are not Mlungisi. You are not Mlungisi here. You are going to be Ray." We didn't have an argument because I immediately understood where she was coming from. But the point I want to make is that Since then, a lot of people just know me as Ray. They don't know Mlungis, but that is where it came from in my encounter with her. But another matter that I want to raise when I speak about her is one of the women who have made a lasting impact in my life, is that when she appointed me, employed me as an article clerk, she said to me, they, as a law firm, had a lot of labor law work, but they didn't know labor law because it was a new thing. And because I had worked at the Legal Resource Center where they did some labor law work, he said, we are going to open a labor law department in the firm. You are going to be in charge. I know you are doing articles. You don't know much. It's going to be your responsibility to make sure that you speak to people who are experienced in labor law, buy books, tell us what books to buy for you. You must know as much as possible on labor law because you will be in charge of labor law. We will be signing pleadings. Don't embarrass us. And that went a long way in instilling self-confidence in me that has lasted for the rest of my life. Because here was this very well-known lawyer who was prepared to trust me and give me such a huge responsibility in circumstances where she had really no reason to have so much confidence in me. But that helped me because I believed that I would be able to run that department and to be a good labor lawyer. And of course, those who know about my background will know that I ended up being quite an involved labor lawyer in practice. I became a judge of the labor court. I became judge president of the labor appeal court and labor court. And I all link to the confidence that Mrs. Mxenge showed in me when really I was just an article clerk. But the confidence she showed in me made me to be determined to succeed in the area particularly that she believed I would be successful in. So I just want to say that she is one of those women who have really had a lasting impact on me, even though the time that I worked under her was short. It was cut short when she was assassinated. It is when we remember struggle heroes and heroines such as Griffith and Victoria Mxenge that we should rededicate ourselves, all of us, to the service of the people and to put their interests first and not our interests and not our friends' interests, not our family members' interests, but the interests of the people. Because when you look at the lives of these great South Africans, you will see that what was uppermost in their mind was to serve the people. It was not about what was in it for them. It was about helping people. It was about helping communities. It was about advancing the struggle for the liberation of the majority in South Africa. I say this because Griffith Mxenge was harassed by the apartheid police and security for a long time. He was detained many times. He was banned, but he always came back and continued with the struggle where he had left off. Obviously, he knew, just as many who were involved in the struggle knew, that being killed by the apartheid agents because of the fight against apartheid was always a possibility and sometimes a likelihood. But he was not prepared to be deterred because of his commitment to the dismantling of apartheid and the attainment of freedom by the majority in this country. And when you look at Mrs. Victoria Mxenge, obviously she knew and she saw what the apartheid police were doing to her husband. But even after her husband had been killed by the apartheid agents, she did not say, "I'm stopping this now." Which, if she said, many could have understood, to say, "My family has suffered too much." But she did not. And she continued to represent freedom fighters and activists within the country. She continued to take part in organizations, community organizations that were fighting apartheid. And obviously, she also knew that being killed by apartheid agents was a possibility and sometimes a likelihood. But look at her courage. She was not going to be deterred. She went on. I will return to her courage and the courage of her husband, Griffiths, later on. The title I've chosen for my lecture today is "The Role and Significance of a Strong Judiciary in South Africa's Constitutional Democracy." I chose this title because it seemed to me that as lawyers, both Griffiths and Victoria Mxenge would have had a particular interest in the type of judiciary that South Africa would have as a constitutional democracy. I believe that they would have wanted a South Africa with a Bill of Rights and a strong and independent judiciary. Although the title of my lecture refers to the role and significance of a strong judiciary in South Africa's constitutional democracy, I propose to deal with both the role and the significance of a strong judiciary at the same time without separating them. Because after all, the significance flows directly from the role. A brief comparison between the role of the judiciary under apartheid and the role of the judiciary in our constitutional democracy may not be out of place to start with. Under apartheid, the judiciary was made up of whites only until close to the end of the apartheid state, when 1 or 2 black judges were appointed. Under our constitutional democracy, judges are made up of all colors in our country. Under apartheid, judges were overwhelmingly male. Under our constitutional democracy, special efforts are made to ensure that there is a fair representation of women in our judiciary. Indeed, women make up more or less 46% of judges in this country. And there is still some work to be done so that their representation should be higher than that. Under apartheid, no woman was the head of a superior court. Under our constitutional democracy, the Supreme Court of Appeal is headed by a woman. And the KwaZulu-Natal division of the High Court is headed by a judge president who is a woman. The Mpumalanga division of the High Court will soon be led by a judge president who is a woman. The Limpopo division of the High Court, the Land Claims Court are temporarily headed by acting judges president who are women. South Africa's Deputy Chief Justice is a woman. The judicial system under apartheid was based on a foundation of racism, whereas the foundation of our judicial system under our constitutional democracy are the values of human dignity, the achievement of equality, and the advancement of human rights and freedom, non-racialism, non-sexism, supremacy of the Constitution, the rule of law, and others. Under apartheid, Parliament was sovereign and could make any laws it chose to make, and the courts had no power to invalidate its laws, irrespective of how irrational they were. In our constitutional democracy, there is no parliamentary sovereignty. In our constitutional democracy, it is our constitution that is supreme, unlike the position under apartheid, where the courts had no power to test the substantive validity of acts of parliament. Under our constitutional democracy, Section 2 of our Constitution proclaims that the Constitution is the supreme law of the Republic. Law or conduct inconsistent with it is invalid, and the obligations imposed on it must be fulfilled. When one looks at the role of courts, one goes back to our Constitution and finds that our Constitution makes it clear that the Bill of Rights applies to the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And when every judge who has been appointed is about to assume their duties as a judge, they take an oath of office. And that oath or affirmation that they take, through it, they commit that they will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa. They will uphold the Constitution, and they will protect all the human rights entrenched in it, and will administer justice to all persons alike, and administer justice without fear, favor, or prejudice. So when one talks about the role of courts, and therefore the role of the judiciary, the starting point is that we're talking about a judiciary in a constitutional democracy where the Bill of Rights is fundamental, where the Constitution is supreme, and we deal with the judiciary, which makes an oath that they will uphold the Constitution and protect all fundamental rights. Courts resolve disputes that are referred to them as contemplated in Section 34 of the Constitution, that is, disputes that can be resolved by the application of law. Courts are supposed to grant relief to all those who show that their fundamental rights have been infringed, who bring their fundamental rights disputes before the courts in terms of the Constitution. When the courts deal with constitutional matters, Section 172 of the Constitution gives them wide powers in order to ensure that they give effective relief to people whose rights have been violated. And this is against the background that this country experienced serious violations of human rights for a long time. So when there are violations of human rights under our constitutional democracy, courts must be able to grant effective relief. Courts are required, in terms of Section 173 of the Constitution, among others, to develop the common law and customary law. And that is part of what they do, because the customary law and the common law, insofar as it remains consistent with the Constitution, is valid. And the Constitution seeks to make sure that where customary law and common law fall short of the requirements of the Constitution, the courts can develop them. Under our constitutional democracy, as I indicated earlier on, our courts have enormous powers, including the power to declare invalid acts of parliament, including the power to declare invalid conduct by the president, where such conduct is inconsistent with the Constitution. The role of the courts includes holding to account the other branches of government when they exceed their powers, because one of our values is the rule of law. But the question that arises, which links to the second part of the title of my lecture, is why do we need a strong judiciary in this country? Probably many of you here will have different reasons why we need a strong judiciary. But I look back at the period and the journey that we have traveled as a country since we attained democracy, and look at what has happened. And when I do that, I can't fail to see certain milestones where I see that the judiciary came in, stepped up, and stopped attempts that were taking this country in a wrong direction. We will all remember a number of cases, including the Nkandla judgment. There are many who say that judgment made a significant contribution to stop the slide that was happening. When I look at the journey that we have traveled, and I look back to the 27th of April 1994, the day that all of us went to vote, many of us for the first time, and think of the country that I thought we would be, the joy that we all had, and look at where we are, I'm not happy. I am not happy. We should not be here. We should not be here. And I believe seriously that many who fought for our liberation, such as Griffith and Victoria Mxenge, wherever they are, they look back and they would not be happy, because we should be somewhere much better. The question that arises is, from now to 30 years from now, because next year will be 30 years into democracy, where are we going to be in 30 years' time? Are we going to change the situation, or are we going to continue to slide down? And when I think about what may happen, I think we are going to need a strong judiciary that is going to come in from time to time and say, no, this is not in accordance with the Constitution. No, this is not in accordance with the law. But I also think that we need to stop looking at a few when we talk about our country. We need to also talk about us, ourselves. What is the contribution that each and every one of us are making to changing the situation around? I chose to speak about the role and significance of the judiciary in South Africa's constitutional democracy, because that is the area where I believe I can make my contribution as a judge, by doing what I'm supposed to do properly, by following my oath of office that I've taken. By making sure that when I believe that I'm doing the right thing, I will not be intimidated by anybody into stopping the right thing. By making sure that I will look back and think about our heroes and heroines such as Griffith Mxenge and Victoria Mxenge. And when I'm thinking of doing something wrong, I think about what they would think after they sacrificed so much so that this country can be a better country. Some of you may be asking the question, you talk about a strong judiciary. What role can we play to make sure that the judiciary that we have is a strong judiciary? Many of you might find that you can play a very important role. You are not going to get a strong judiciary just when somebody becomes a judge. A strong judiciary means a judiciary that has integrity. And if somebody has not been somebody with integrity for many years, they are not going to change once they are judges and suddenly have integrity. It should start much earlier. And I know that in the legal practice, very often the training is there. But a strong judiciary also requires judges who do not need to be done a favor in order to get promotion, in order to be appointed as a judge. You need people who become judges because that's the choice they've made. They have integrity, they have the knowledge, they have the competence. Because as the evidence in the State Capture Commission revealed, it is easier to capture somebody who doesn't have the qualifications or the competence for the job, because they rely on somebody doing them a favor to keep that job. But when you have somebody who knows that they are in that job because they deserve to be there, they have got the qualifications, they've got the experience, they're competent, it's more difficult to capture that person. And therefore, as more and more groups might wish to capture the judiciary, we must have a judiciary that is strong, that doesn't think they need to be friends with anybody in order to get promoted or to get appointed. Which is why I'm very concerned about any political parties who may be making recommendations about which judge or who should be appointed as a judge or who should be promoted in the judiciary, when they do that outside of the structure, the constitutional structure that has been put in place for the consideration of candidates for judicial posts. I wish that everybody would take the attitude that in terms of our constitution, we have a structure. Whoever wants to take whatever position in the judiciary, that must be discussed in that structure and not attempts being made outside of the structure to influence who gets appointed to certain judicial positions. Part of what we need in order to have a strong judiciary is something that we already have in our constitution. That is the manner, the transparent manner in which judges get appointed. Everybody is able to say, I know so and so, it doesn't have integrity, should not be appointed, and put evidence. They get interviewed in front of the whole world. That is quite important. The system does have certain weaknesses, that's for sure. It's not perfect, but certainly there is transparency. But also, in terms of our constitution, once you have been appointed as a judge, you have a security of tenure which enables you to say, as long as I've done nothing wrong, but I've just been doing my job, I cannot be removed from this position. So you don't have to make decisions that favor certain people because you fear that you will be removed. And when you want to be promoted, the process goes through the same structure. But more than anything, the strong judiciary that we need must be rooted in integrity, fearlessness, and a strong commitment to always act in accordance with one's oath of office and in accordance with the Constitution, the law, and the evidence. If the judiciary plays its role the way it should do, and ensures that it does so without fear, without favor, without prejudice, it's going to make a serious contribution in helping this country to go in the right direction. But if the judiciary becomes weak, then we are going to be in trouble. As the judiciary, we appreciate the power that the people of South Africa have given us through the Constitution. We use that power with humility because we are there to serve the people. We do not think these positions we occupy are positions that makes us bosses. We see ourselves as the servants of the people of South Africa. And as long as we have that attitude, we have integrity, we are fearless, we are courageous, we are committed to doing the right thing, we are committed to keeping our oath of office, then we will, as the judiciary, have done our part. The challenge that I want to put to all of you is you must identify where you are going to play your role in making a contribution to us rebuilding this country and taking it in the right direction. Each and every one of us has a role that they can play. Mrs. Victoria Mxenge and Griffith Mxenge were prepared to die fighting to dismantle apartheid and fighting for the liberation of the majority of this country. The question that arises is, apartheid was dismantled politically. We know that there are certain remnants of it, but choose what you are going to focus on, where you will make a contribution. Choose where you are going to focus on, because it also doesn't help to just criticize and you do nothing. This country is our country. When we are failed, we must remember that our destiny is in our hands. Our destiny is in our hands. The judiciary will play its role. Go and play your role too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Justice. I'll still wait for everybody to settle. Thank you, Chief Justice. An inspirational lecture that resonates not only with me, and I may add that I may just prescribe that lecture for Monday's human rights law class. What do you think? I see that my predecessor is sitting in front of me. He also lectured human rights law, Judge Govinji. But not only it was meaningful for me, but also for all of our guests. And the values so deeply cherished by Pius Langer and Griffith and Victoria Mxenge, which values are now enshrined in our Constitution. And on that note, I request the Vice-Chancellor to come onto the stage and to be seated next to the Chief Justice to enable us to conclude the final part of this ceremony. I also request Professor Andre Kiert, a man also rooted in human rights, I might add, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Engagement and Transformation, to deliver a vote of thanks and to conclude by handing over gifts as a symbol of our appreciation. BBC, on my left.
Thanks, Joe. Honored guests present here today and those who have joined us online, all protocol observed. It is indeed a great pleasure to do the vote of thanks after listening to such an engaging lecture. Thank you so much, Judge Zondo, Chief Justice Zondo. So earlier this evening, the Chief Justice opened the new Pius Langa building. For this, we are particularly grateful and appreciative of the Langas for working with our university to make this a realization that is both meaningful and indicate our transformation posture through naming our spaces. Many, many thanks. The university has hosted this particular inaugural lecture in 2009.